The excavator's engine died with a mechanical wheeze, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of power lines overhead. I stared at the yellow cease and desist notice fluttering from the machine's cab, its official letterhead catching the late afternoon sun like a taunt. 3 years of planning, permits, and preparation all stopped dead by a single complaint. "You can't be serious," I muttered, tearing the notice free. The paper crinkled in my grip as I read the bureaucratic language that effectively killed my ranch expansion project. Violation of local building codes. Immediate cessation of construction activities. Pending investigation. My jaw tightened. I dotted every I and crossed every T on those permits. This wasn't about building codes. The sound of approaching footsteps made me turn. Karen Whitmore strutted across my property line like she owned the place. Her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around her phone, already typing what I knew would be another social media victory lap. She wore that smug expression I'd come to despise, the look of someone who believed power came from complaining loud enough to the right people. Well, Marcus," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Looks like your little construction project hit a snag. Such a shame when people don't follow the rules." I folded the notice carefully, tucking it into my shirt pocket. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have, pressing against my chest like a stone. "I have all the permits. Karen, you know that." She laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the evening air. "Permits can be reconsidered, especially when concerned citizens bring legitimate safety issues to light." Her fingers danced across her phone screen. "Victory for the community," she was standing up to neighbors. "Rules exist for a reason." I'd lived in this corner of Colorado for 15 years, turning a modest inheritance into something substantial. My ranch wasn't just property. It was legacy, purpose, the embodiment of everything I'd worked for since my father passed. The expansion would have added stables, a workshop, maybe even space for the community writing programs I'd dreamed of hosting. Now, it sat frozen, a monument to one woman's need to control everything around her. "You realize this affects more than just me," I said, keeping my voice level. "The contractors, the suppliers, the timeline for the whole project. Should have thought of that before you tried to skirt the building codes." Karen's manicured nail tapped against her phone case. "The Henderson Heights HOA takes these matters very seriously. We have standards to maintain." Standards. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Karen had moved to Henderson Heights 2 years ago, immediately positioning herself as the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian. She'd complained about everything from the color of mailboxes to the height of grass, turning the monthly HOA meetings into trials where she played judge, jury, and executioner. "My property isn't even in your HOA jurisdiction," I reminded her. Her smile widened. "No, but it affects property values in the surrounding area. That makes it everyone's business." She held up her phone, the screen glowing with notifications. Amazing how quickly the county responds when enough people express concern. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the gravel with metronomic precision. She paused at the property line, turning back with theatrical flair. "Oh, and Marcus, I'd lawyer up if I were you. This is just the beginning." The next morning brought a cascade of complications. My contractor, Jim Rodriguez, arrived at dawn with coffee and bad news. "County inspectors coming this afternoon," he said, shaking his head. "They want to review every single permit, every measurement, every material specification." I poured myself coffee from Jim's thermos, the steam rising between us like a barrier. "How long will that take?" "Best case 2 weeks. Worst case?" Jim shrugged. "Could be months. And that's assuming they don't find any issues." Issues. There wouldn't be any issues, because there weren't any to find. but I'd learned enough about bureaucracy to know that process mattered more than truth. Karen had weaponized the system, turning my own tax dollars against me. "What about the crew?" I asked. "I'll have to move them to other projects. Can't keep them sitting idle." Jim's weathered face showed genuine regret. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This is bullshit. And we both know it." After Jim left, I stood alone in the morning quiet, studying the half-built foundation that would now sit empty for God knew how long. The concrete looked accusatory in the harsh sunlight, a reminder of momentum lost and dreams deferred. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister in Denver. Saw Karen's post on the community Facebook page. "What's going on?" I opened the Henderson Heights residence group, scrolling through Karen's latest manifesto. She'd posted photos of my construction site with captions about dangerous building practices and neighborhood safety concerns. The comment section had exploded with reactions, some supportive of her stance, others questioning her motives. "Finally, someone willing to stand up to the rule breakers," wrote Janet from Maple Street. "Property values are everyone's concern." But Tom Harrison had replied, "Marcus has been nothing but respectful to this community. Maybe we should hear his side before jumping to conclusions." The digital battlefield stretched across my screen, neighbors choosing sides in a conflict I'd never wanted to start. Karen had positioned herself as the community's protector, casting me as the villain who threatened their suburban paradise. I typed and deleted half a dozen responses, each one sounding either defensive or aggressive. Finally, I put the phone away. Let her have her moment of digital triumph. The truth had a way of surfacing eventually. The county inspector arrived precisely at 2 p.m., clipboard in hand, and skepticism in his eyes. Frank Morrison had been doing building inspections for 20 years, and his reputation for thoroughness was legendary. Under normal circumstances, I'd have welcomed his professionalism. Today, it felt like surgery with a rusty knife. "Mr. Thompson," he said, consulting his clipboard, "I understand there are concerns about code compliance on this project. Concerns raised by someone with no construction experience and no jurisdiction over my property," I replied, handing him my folder of permits and approvals. Frank's eyebrows rose slightly. "I have to investigate all complaints, regardless of their source. That's how the system works." For the next 3 hours, Frank measured, photographed, and documented every aspect of my construction site. He checked foundation depths, material specifications, electrical rough-ins, and plumbing layouts. His diligence was impressive and infuriating in equal measure. "Everything looks good so far," he admitted, making notes on his clipboard. "Your permits are in order. Work matches the approved plans. So I can resume construction." Frank shook his head. "I still need to complete my full review, file my report, and wait for county approval. Standard procedure." "How long?" 2 to 3 weeks, assuming no complications." I walked Frank to his truck, watching him secure his equipment with methodical care. "Off the record, Frank, what do you think about this complaint?" He paused, considering his words carefully. "I think some people have too much time on their hands. But I also think you'll be cleared to resume work. Your contractor does good work." After Frank left, I sat on my porch, staring at the idle construction site. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of electrical lines carrying power to the neighborhood below. Those lines belonged to my company Rocky Mountain Power Solutions, the private utility I'd built from nothing over the past decade. Most people assumed their electricity came from the regional grid, but Henderson Heights was different. When the development was built, the county had approved my company's infrastructure proposal. We'd laid the lines, installed the transformers, and maintained the entire system. Every light in Karen's house, every appliance in her kitchen, every device charging in her bedroom, all of it powered by my company. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had spent the last 2 days bragging online about shutting down my construction project, posting photos and celebrating her victory. She'd even made a video, standing in her brightly lit kitchen, explaining how concerned citizens could protect their neighborhoods from reckless developers. I pulled out my phone and opened the Henderson Heights Facebook group again. Karen's latest post had garnered 43 likes and 18 comments. The photo showed her smiling next to her kitchen window, with my idle construction site visible in the background. Victory, her caption read. Thanks to the power of community action, we've stopped a dangerous construction project that threatened our neighborhood's safety and property values. This is what happens when residents stand together. Community power. Standing up. Victory for all. Community power. The phrase echoed in my mind as I scrolled through the comments. Karen had no idea how accurate her hashtag really was. The harassment escalated over the following days. Karen didn't stop at the construction complaint. She began documenting every aspect of my property, photographing my trucks, timing my comings and goings, and filing noise complaints about equipment that had been sitting silent for a week. On Thursday morning, I found her standing at my gate with a measuring tape, documenting the height of my fence. Just making sure everything's up to code, she said sweetly when I approached. That fence has been there for 8 years. Karen, doesn't mean it was built correctly. She held up her phone, snapping photos of the fence posts. I'm documenting everything for my report to the county. I watched her work, marveling at the dedication she brought to her campaign of harassment. She'd arrived in a pristine white SUV, dressed like she was attending a business meeting rather than measuring fence posts. Her determination was almost admirable in its completeness. You know this is harassment, right? I asked. I'm on public property, conducting legitimate community oversight. She smiled, the expression as cold as winter wind. If you don't like transparency, maybe you should consider relocating. That afternoon, I received another visit from Frank Morrison. More complaints, he said apologetically. This time about your fence height, setback violations, and something about unauthorized grading. Frank, you've been out here 4 times this week. I know. But I have to respond to every complaint. It's policy. He looked genuinely embarrassed. For what it's worth, I think you're getting a raw deal here. Can't you tell them the complaints are frivolous? I can note that in my reports, but I still have to investigate. The county doesn't want to get sued for failing to respond to citizen concerns. That evening, I drove through Henderson Heights for the first time in months. The neighborhood looked pristine in the golden hour light manicured lawns, perfect sidewalks, houses that could have been pulled from a magazine. Street lamps were beginning to flicker on, casting warm pools of light across the residential streets. My electricity flowing through those lines, powering those lamps, lighting those homes. I'd built this infrastructure when Henderson Heights was nothing but blueprints and promises. Now it supported a community that had chosen to turn against me based on one woman's vendetta. I pulled up to the community center, where the monthly HOA meeting was in progress. Through the windows, I could see Karen at the front of the room, gesturing animatedly while neighbors listened from folding chairs. Her presentation slideshow was projected on the wall photos of my property, construction equipment, and what looked like building code excerpts. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Harrison, "You should be here. Karen's making it sound like you're building a toxic waste dump." I considered going inside, defending myself against whatever accusations she was making. But I'd learned that Karen's battleground was designed to favor her. She'd done her homework, prepared her talking points, and recruited allies. Walking into that room would be like stepping into a trap. Instead, I drove home, my mind turning over possibilities. Karen had weaponized the system against me, using bureaucracy as a bludgeon. But systems could be turned in different directions. They could serve different purposes. Back at my ranch, I sat in my office, staring at the utility maps spread across my desk. Every line, every transformer, every connection point in Henderson Heights was documented here. The infrastructure that kept the community running, that powered their comfortable suburban lives, that enabled Karen to post her victory videos online. My company had contracts with the county, maintenance schedules, and regulatory obligations. We were required to perform regular system upgrades, safety inspections, and infrastructure improvements, all perfectly legal, all well within our authority as the licensed utility provider. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah Chen, my operations manager. Sarah, I need you to schedule some infrastructure maintenance for the Henderson Heights grid. What kind of maintenance? Comprehensive system upgrades, transformer replacements, line improvements, safety inspections, the full package. That's pretty extensive work. Marcus, how long are we talking? I studied the utility maps, calculating the scope of what I was contemplating. Several days, maybe a week, depending on what we find once we start. When do you want to start? Monday morning. And Sarah, make sure we send proper notice to all affected customers. We want to be completely transparent about necessary infrastructure improvements. The notices went out Friday afternoon professional. Courteous letters explaining the upcoming utility work. Temporary service interruptions were sometimes necessary for system safety and reliability. Rocky Mountain Power Solutions appreciated customers' patience during these essential upgrades. Karen's response was predictable. Saturday morning brought another social media post, this one complaining about the suspicious timing of utility work. She'd photographed the notice, highlighting the part about service interruptions with red arrows and exclamation points. Convenient how the power company decides to do maintenance. Right after I expose safety violations in our neighborhood, she wrote. Are they trying to intimidate concerned citizens? We won't be silenced. Power corruption. Sheeter standing up. Sheechedi community strong. The irony was delicious. Karen had spent weeks documenting my every move, measuring my fence, timing my activities, and filing complaint after complaint. Now she was experiencing the same level of scrutiny, the same disruption to her routine, the same feeling of being watched and judged. But she still didn't understand the real picture. She thought the power company was some distant corporation, some faceless utility that might be pressured or influenced by her complaints. She had no idea that the person she'd been harassing for weeks was about to personally oversee every aspect of her neighborhood's electrical infrastructure. Sunday evening, I received a call from Tom Harrison. Marcus, we need to talk. There's something you should know about Karen. What now? She's planning something for tomorrow. Some kind of protest or demonstration. She's been calling neighbors, trying to get people to join her. A protest about what? About the power company maintenance. She's convinced it's connected to your construction project somehow. She wants to make a statement about corporate intimidation. I almost laughed. Karen was preparing to protest against her own power company, demanding accountability from the very person she'd been harassing. The situation had reached a level of absurdity that defied description. Tom, can I ask you something? Sure. Have you ever wondered who owns Rocky Mountain Power Solutions? There was a long pause. I never really thought about it. Why? Just curious. I'll talk to you later. Tom. Monday morning arrived with the rumble of utility trucks and the purposeful energy of organized work. My crew assembled at the Henderson Heights grid access point at dawn, their equipment gleaming in the early light. Sarah had assembled a team of 8 technicians, each one briefed on the scope and importance of the maintenance project. Remember, I told them during the morning briefing, This is comprehensive infrastructure upgrading. We're not cutting corners or rushing the job. Every component gets inspected. Every connection gets tested. Every safety protocol gets followed. "How long do you want us to take?" asked Miguel, my lead technician. "However long it takes to do the job right. If we find issues that need addressing, we address them. If we need to order replacement parts, we order them. This is about system reliability and customer safety." At exactly 8 a.m., we began the process of powering down the Henderson Heights grid. The shutdown was methodical, section by section, ensuring that critical infrastructure like traffic signals and emergency services remained active. But residential power, the electricity that ran coffee makers, charged phones, and powered home offices, went dark. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. The first calls were polite inquiries about restoration timelines. Then came the complaints about spoiled food, disrupted work schedules, and canceled appointments. By noon, the tone had shifted to demands for immediate service restoration. Karen's call came at 12:47 p.m. "This is Karen Whitmore from Henderson Heights. I demand to speak to whoever's in charge of this power outage." "This is Marcus Thompson, owner of Rocky Mountain Power Solutions. How can I help you?" The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. When Karen spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, uncertain. You own the power company." "I do. We sent notice about necessary infrastructure maintenance." "Is there a specific concern about the work?" "When will the power be restored?" "When the maintenance is complete. We're conducting comprehensive system upgrades to ensure reliability and safety. These things take time to do properly." "How much time?" "Hard to say. We might discover additional issues that need addressing." "Could be several days." Another long pause. "This is about my complaints." "Isn't it about your construction project?" "This is about maintaining electrical infrastructure." "Karen, the same infrastructure that powers your home while you post videos complaining about your neighbors? You can't do this. This is retaliation. I'm performing legally required maintenance on equipment I own. If you have concerns about utility service, you're welcome to file a complaint with the County Public Utilities Commission." "I will. I'll file complaints everywhere: the county, the state, the federal government. This is illegal." "You do that, Karen. In the meantime, I have work to do." I hung up and returned to the job site, where my crew was methodically inspecting every transformer, every connection point, every piece of equipment in the grid. The work was genuinely necessary. Some of the infrastructure was approaching the end of its service life, and preventive maintenance was far preferable to emergency repairs. By afternoon, word had spread through the neighborhood that I owned the power company. Tom Harrison arrived at the worksite around 3 p.m., looking sheepish and concerned. "Marcus, I had no idea." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Didn't seem relevant. I live here. I work here. I contribute to the community. The business stuff is just business." "But Karen's been harassing me for weeks, filing frivolous complaints, disrupting my business, and turning my neighbors against me. Now she's experiencing what it feels like when someone else controls something important in your life." Tom looked uncomfortable. "People are getting pretty upset about the power situation. Food spoiling, work disrupted, kids complaining about no internet. I understand their frustration. But this maintenance is necessary, and it's going to take as long as it takes. Is there anything that might speed up the process?" I studied Tom's face, seeing the diplomatic question behind his words. "You mean, is there anything Karen could do to make this go faster?" "I'm not saying that. The neighborhood is getting restless. People are taking sides, and it's getting ugly." "Tom, I've been dealing with ugliness for weeks. Karen turned my construction project into a personal vendetta, used the system to harass me, and celebrated every delay and complication. Now she's learning that systems can work in different directions. Tuesday brought more calls, more complaints, and more demands for immediate service restoration. But it also brought something else, a growing understanding among the neighbors about the real dynamics of their situation. Janet from Maple Street, who'd initially supported Karen's complaints, called to apologize. "I had no idea about the harassment. I thought you were just, not following the rules. I've always followed the rules. Janet, I just didn't know the rules could be weaponized. When will the power be back on?" "Soon. The maintenance is going well, but we want to make sure everything's perfect before we restore service." By Wednesday, Karen had stopped posting on social media. The community Facebook group had shifted from her victory celebrations to discussions about the power outage, with many neighbors beginning to question the wisdom of her campaign against me. "Maybe we should have gotten both sides of the story before taking action," wrote David from Oak Lane. "Marcus has been a good neighbor for years. One complaint doesn't make someone a villain." The response was immediate and pointed, "Where was this perspective when Karen was calling for support?" "Some of us tried to say this from the beginning," replied Maria Santos. I watched the digital conversation unfold, seeing neighbors reassess their positions and reconsider their alliances. The power outage had clarified certain realities about interdependence and consequence that abstract discussions about building codes could never convey. Wednesday evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Frank Morrison knocked on my door just as I was finishing dinner, his county inspector badge visible, but his demeanor unusually subdued. "Marcus, can we talk?" "Sure. Come in." Frank settled into my living room chair, looking uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about all these inspections, all these complaints. Something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know the difference between legitimate safety concerns and personal vendettas. What's happening to you?" "It's not right." I poured Frank a cup of coffee, giving him time to organize his thoughts. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to file my final report tomorrow. Everything's in compliance. Always has been. You can resume construction immediately." "What about future complaints?" "I'll still have to respond, but I'll also be documenting the pattern. Frivolous complaints waste taxpayer resources and harm legitimate property owners." Frank finished his coffee and stood to leave. "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this situation with more restraint than most people would show." "I'm not trying to hurt anyone. Frank, I just want to build my ranch expansion and live in peace." "I know. And I think your neighbors are starting to understand that too." Thursday morning brought a delegation. Tom Harrison, Maria Santos, and 3 other neighbors knocked on my door at 8 a.m., their expressions serious but hopeful. "Marcus, we need to talk," Tom said. "About Karen, about the power situation, about how to fix this mess." I invited them in, curious about their proposal. They arranged themselves in my living room like a diplomatic mission, each one carefully choosing their words. "We realize we made a mistake," Maria began. "Some of us got caught up in Karen's campaign without really understanding what was happening. We want to make it right," added Jennifer from Pine Street. "Karen's actions don't represent the whole community." "What are you proposing?" I asked. "We're calling for a special HOA meeting," Tom said. "Tonight, 7 p.m. at the community center. We want to address this situation publicly, get everything out in the open. And Karen, she'll be there. We've made it clear that this behavior has to stop." I studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse and determination. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to come to the meeting. Tell your side of the story. Let the community hear what really happened. And the power situation. Maria looked uncomfortable. We're hoping. We're hoping that once this gets resolved, the maintenance work might be completed more quickly. I leaned back in my chair, considering their proposal. The maintenance work was genuinely necessary, but my crew had been working with deliberate thoroughness. We could complete the remaining upgrades in a day if we focused on essential items, rather than comprehensive overhauls. I'll come to the meeting, I said finally. But I'm not making any promises about the timeline for utility work. Fair enough, Tom replied. We just want a chance to set things right. After they left, I called Sarah to check on the maintenance progress. How are we doing? Ahead of schedule, actually. We've replaced the aging transformers, upgraded the main distribution lines, and completed all the safety inspections. We could restore service this afternoon if needed. Hold off for now. I want to see how tonight's meeting goes. Any particular reason? Let's just say I want to complete the full scope of necessary maintenance before restoration. The Henderson Heights Community Center was packed that evening. I arrived to find cars lining the streets, neighbors streaming toward the building, and an atmosphere of anticipation that reminded me of a town hall meeting during a crisis. Inside, the folding chairs were arranged in rows, facing a small podium. Karen sat in the front row, her posture rigid, her face a mask of controlled fury. She'd dressed formally business suit, professional makeup, the armor of someone preparing for battle. I took a seat in the back, noting the way conversation stopped when people noticed me. Some neighbors nodded respectfully, others looked away uncomfortably. The division in the community was visible, mapped across the room in clusters of allies and uncomfortable neutrals. Tom Harrison called the meeting to order at precisely 7 p.m. We're here tonight to address a situation that's gotten out of hand. Our community has been divided by conflicts that could have been avoided through better communication and mutual respect. He gestured toward Karen. Karen, you requested this forum to address your concerns about construction activities in our area. Please proceed. Karen stood and walked to the podium with theatrical dignity. She'd prepared extensively printed handouts, a PowerPoint presentation, and a folder thick with documentation. Thank you. Tom, I want to start by saying that everything I've done has been motivated by concern for our community's safety and property values. She launched into her prepared remarks, describing building code violations, safety hazards, and the necessity of vigilant oversight. Her presentation was polished, professional, and carefully constructed to portray her as a concerned citizen protecting her neighbors from reckless development. Some people have accused me of harassment, she continued, but I prefer to call it accountability. When someone threatens our community's well-being, we have an obligation to act. The room was silent as she spoke, but I could feel the undercurrents of skepticism. Karen's credibility had been damaged by the power outage revelation, and her words carried less weight than they might have a week earlier. I want to be clear about something else, she said, her voice rising slightly. The recent power outage is nothing more than retaliation for my legitimate complaints. It's an abuse of power, and it's illegal. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen had made her accusation, drawn her line in the sand. Now everyone waited to see how I would respond. Tom looked toward the back of the room. Marcus, would you like to respond? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes following my movement. I'd like to say a few things. Yes. G, walking to the front of the room. I passed Karen's seat. She stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge my presence. I reached the podium and turned to face the community that had become divided over one woman's campaign against me. I've lived in this area for 15 years, I began. I've been a good neighbor, paid my taxes, contributed to local charities, and minded my own business. When I decided to expand my ranch, I did everything by the book, hired licensed contractors, obtained all necessary permits, and followed every regulation. I pulled out my folder of documentation permits, approvals, inspection reports, contractor credentials. Frank Morrison has confirmed that my construction project meets all code requirements. It always has. The complaints filed against me were frivolous, designed to harass and delay rather than address legitimate concerns. But let me address Karen's most serious accusation, that I'm retaliating against her through the power company. I set down my folder and looked directly at her. Karen, 3 weeks ago, you posted a video celebrating the shutdown of my construction project. You called it a victory for community power. Karen's face had gone pale, but her expression remained defiant. You were right about community power, I continued. This community runs on electrical power that I provide through my company. The same power that lights your home while you post complaints about me. The same power that charges your phone while you call county inspectors. The same power that runs your computer while you organize campaigns against your neighbors. The room was dead silent now, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The maintenance work we're conducting is legitimate, necessary, and long overdue. Some of the infrastructure serving this neighborhood was approaching the end of its service life. Would you prefer that we wait for equipment failure during a winter storm? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Karen, this contains copies of every complaint you've filed against me, every inspection you've demanded, every action you've taken to disrupt my business and my life. 17 separate complaints in 3 weeks. 17 visits from county inspectors. 17 attempts to find violations that don't exist. I set the folder on the podium with a satisfying thud. You weaponized the system against me, turned bureaucracy into a tool of harassment. You celebrated every delay, every complication, every moment of frustration you caused. You told your neighbors that this was about safety and property values, but it was really about power. The power to control other people's lives. The power to dictate what your neighbors can build on their own property. The power to turn a community against someone based on nothing but your own need to be in charge. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You can't intimidate me with your little power games. I'll file complaints with every regulatory agency in the state. You do that, I replied calmly. File all the complaints you want. I'm sure they'll be investigated with the same thoroughness as your complaints about my construction project. This isn't over. Actually, Karen, it is over. You've shown this community who you really are. You've demonstrated that your concerns about safety and property values were just pretexts for harassment. You've lost the moral authority to speak for anyone but yourself. I turned away from her, addressing the room at large. I want to apologize to those of you who've been inconvenienced by the power outage. The maintenance work is nearly complete, and service will be restored soon. I also want to thank those neighbors who took the time to understand the real situation rather than jumping to conclusions. As for my ranch expansion, construction will resume tomorrow. I hope it will serve the community well for many years to come. I walked back to my seat, leaving Karen standing alone at the front of the room. The silence stretched for several seconds before Tom returned to the podium. I think we've heard enough for tonight, he said. This situation has been a learning experience for all of us. I hope we can move forward with better communication and mutual respect. As the meeting broke up, neighbors approached me with apologies, explanations, and requests for forgiveness. Some looked embarrassed, others relieved, all of them eager to repair relationships that had been damaged by Karen's campaign. Karen, meanwhile, gathered her materials and left without speaking to anyone. She walked out of the community center alone, her allies having evaporated like morning mist. I stayed until the room was empty, helping stack chairs and turn off lights. Tom approached me as I was leaving. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up sooner. You spoke up when it mattered." "Tom, that's what counts. Will you really restore power tomorrow?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "The maintenance work is complete. Service will be restored first thing in the morning." Friday morning brought the satisfying hum of electricity returning to Henderson Heights. My crew completed the final connections at dawn, and by 7 a.m., lights were blazing, coffee makers were brewing, and the familiar sounds of suburban life had resumed. My phone rang constantly with calls of thanks and relief. Neighbors who'd been frustrated by the outage now expressed gratitude for the improved electrical service. The new transformers and upgraded lines would provide more reliable power for years to come. "Thank you, Marcus," said Janet from Maple Street. "I know this week was difficult for everyone, but my power has never been more stable." "Just doing my job," I replied. "I'm glad the maintenance work met your needs." By noon, Jim Rodriguez had arrived with his construction crew, ready to resume work on the ranch expansion. The excavators roared to life. Foundation work continued, and the project that had been frozen for weeks began moving forward again. "Good to be back," Jim said, surveying the site. "How do you want to handle the timeline?" "Full speed ahead. We've lost enough time to bureaucratic nonsense." "Any concerns about more complaints?" "I don't think that's going to be a problem anymore." Karen's house remained dark that day. Curtains drawn, no signs of activity. Her pristine SUV sat in the driveway, but she didn't emerge to document our resumption of construction. The woman who'd spent weeks photographing every aspect of my project now seemed to have lost interest in surveillance. The Henderson Heights Facebook group had transformed as well. Karen's posts celebrating her victory over my construction project had been replaced by community discussions about the importance of good neighbors and fair treatment. Several people had shared stories of Marcus's helpfulness over the years, jump-starting cars, clearing snow from driveways, helping with home repairs. "I never realized how much Marcus contributed to our community," wrote Susan from Elm Street. "We were too quick to judge based on one person's complaints." David from Oak Lane had posted a formal apology. "I want to publicly apologize to Marcus Thompson for supporting actions that were clearly harassment. I should have gotten all the facts before taking sides." Over the following days, the pattern became clear. Karen had lost her influence, her credibility, and her ability to mobilize neighbors against perceived enemies. The woman who'd proclaimed herself the community's protector had been revealed as its primary source of division. Construction on the ranch expansion proceeded without interruption. No more complaints were filed. No more inspections were demanded. No more delays were manufactured. The project that had been frozen by Karen's campaign was now moving forward faster than ever, supported by neighbors who wanted to see it completed. Tom Harrison stopped by the construction site the following week, bringing coffee and curious questions about the ranch expansion plans. "I heard you might be offering writing lessons once the stables are finished." "That's the plan. Community programs, therapeutic writing, maybe some educational activities for local schools." "My daughter would love that. She's been asking for writing lessons for months." "Tell her she'll be one of the first students when we're ready." Tom looked around the construction site, taking in the progress that had been made in just a few days. "I have to ask, did you plan this whole thing? The power outage, the meeting, the way everything worked out?" "I planned to defend myself against harassment, Tom. Everything else was just Karen learning that actions have consequences." She's been very quiet lately. Sometimes people need time to reflect on their choices. 2 weeks later, I was installing outdoor lighting around the construction site when I noticed a for sale sign in Karen's front yard. The pristine white SUV was gone, replaced by a moving truck and several workers carrying boxes. I walked over to where Tom was checking his mail. "Looks like we're losing a neighbor." "Yeah, Karen's relocating. Something about a fresh start in a new community." "Did she say anything about her experience here?" Tom shook his head. "She didn't talk to anyone. Just arranged the sale and started packing." I watched the moving truck pull away, taking with it the woman who'd tried to control her neighbors through harassment and manipulation. Karen had discovered that power was a double-edged sword. It could be used to attack others, but it could also be turned against the attacker. "Think she learned anything from all this?" Tom asked. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll find a new community to terrorize. Either way, it's their problem now." That evening, I stood on my porch, watching the sun set over Henderson Heights. The construction site was quiet, equipment secured for the night, but progress was visible everywhere. The foundation was complete, framing had begun, and the outline of the expanded ranch was taking shape. The streetlights flickered on my electricity, flowing through lines I'd built, powering a community that had learned valuable lessons about judgment, fairness, and the consequences of unchecked harassment. The neighborhood felt peaceful in a way it hadn't since Karen's arrival. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah at the power company. "New service request for the Henderson Heights grid. Looks like someone's building a pool house on Oak Lane." I smiled, typing back, "No problem. Schedule the connection for next week." Should I check if they have all the proper permits? "That's not our job. Sarah, we provide power to anyone who needs it, as long as they pay their bills." "Copy that." Service with a smile. As I put my phone away, I thought about the lessons learned over the past month. Karen had tried to use the system to control and harass her neighbors, but she discovered that systems could be turned in unexpected directions. She'd celebrated community power without understanding who actually controlled the power in her community. The ranch expansion would be completed within 2 months, featuring everything I'd originally planned, plus a few additions inspired by neighbor requests. The community writing program would serve local families. The educational activities would bring school groups to learn about ranch life. And the therapeutic programs would help people who needed healing. Karen had tried to stop something beautiful from being built, but her efforts had only delayed it. Now that construction was proceeding without harassment, the project was moving faster than ever, supported by neighbors who wanted to see it succeed. I walked inside, turning on lights throughout my house lights, powered by the same electrical grid that served Henderson Heights, maintained by the same company that had taught Karen about consequences, controlled by the same person she'd tried to destroy through harassment and manipulation. The irony was complete. The justice was served, and the community was stronger for having faced its divisions honestly. Karen had learned that power was indeed important in community life, but not the kind of power she'd thought she wielded. 3 months later, I hosted the first community event at my completed ranch expansion. Neighbors gathered for a barbecue, tours of the new facilities, and demonstrations of the riding programs. Children laughed as they met the horses. Adults admired the craftsmanship of the new buildings, and everyone enjoyed the sense of community that had been restored. Tom Harrison approached me as the evening wound down. "This is really something. Marcus, I'm glad we all came to our senses. It turned out better than I'd hoped. Sometimes conflict can lead to stronger relationships." Any regrets about how things went with Karen? I considered his question. Watching families enjoy the facilities that had almost been prevented by one woman's campaign of harassment. I regret that it came to conflict at all, but I don't regret defending myself against someone who was trying to destroy my dreams. She brought it on herself. She made her choices, and I made mine. The community made theirs too. Eventually, as the last guests departed, I stood alone in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the fruits of years of planning and months of struggle. The ranch expansion was complete. The community was united, and the lights of Henderson Heights glowed warmly in the distance, powered by my electricity, serving neighbors who'd learned to value fairness over faction. Karen had tried to shut down my construction project, but she'd never understood the real source of power in our community. Now she was gone, seeking a fresh start elsewhere, while the ranch she'd tried to prevent stood as a monument to the simple truth that bullies eventually meet their match. The lights burned bright. The community was stronger, and justice had been served in the most poetic way possible through the very power systems that Karen had never bothered to understand. Her hashtag about community power had proven more accurate than she'd ever imagined, just not in the way she'd intended. I walked inside, flipping switches that sent electricity flowing through lines I'd built, powering a home I'd defended, in a community that had learned the difference between legitimate concern and personal vendetta. The ranch expansion was complete, the harassment was over, and the future looked brighter than ever. Sometimes the best revenge is simply plugging in and lighting up the world around you.